Good morning. Welcome to Hokyoji's Sunday Dharma Talk. Today is December 12th, 2021. And we're very grateful to have Reverend Jushin Stephyn Butcher with us today to give the Dharma Talk. Reverend Butcher started his Buddhist journey in 1997, practicing in the Tibetan tradition under HH Penor Rinpoche. Several Dharma names later, he found his way here to Hokyoji, where he became a student of Dokai Georgesen. Jushin, meaning abiding trust, received jukai from Dokai in 2013 and was ordained in 2017. He works as a software engineer by day, and he teaches artificial intelligence at Johns Hopkins by night. And he resides in Cambridge, Maryland with his husband, their dog, some chickens, and a garden. So thank you, Jushin, and thank you everyone for being here. So over to you.
All right. Ooh, echo. Echo? No more echo. All right. So, good morning. It's great to be with you all. This talk this morning is a little bit of an experiment. It's kind of a lean in the sense that I am actually going to try to use the technology to give my Dharma talk this morning instead of merely relying on it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I can share my screen, and it looks like I can. So everyone can see that. You might want to switch the view on your screen so that you can see the screen sharing. And then I'm going to stop sharing now. And you might also, at this point, also want to switch it instead to speaker view instead of gallery view. So there's a gallery view where you can see everybody's smiling faces. And then there's a speaker view where you can only see my really messy office. And you don't necessarily have to do that yet, but you just want to make sure you can see that it can work, because it'll be important later. And actually, let me just demonstrate why it's important, because we need to get one more piece. All right, so you should see a blankish piece of paper, and hopefully my finger. And when I move my finger, hopefully for you, it goes up. Does it go up for everybody? Because sometimes it's backwards, which is weird and scary. And then this is going to be left to right, right? So we got to make sure we're doing the right axes. All right. Okay. So if you want to see me and everyone's smiling faces, you can turn it back to gallery view for now. And I'm actually going to start sharing my screen. I hope. All right, so the title of my talk this morning, as you might already have gleaned, is Drawing on Emptiness. And it is a pun, but it's also sort of an attempt to explain to others some ideas that have been sort of rattling around in my head for the last 10 or so years. Hopefully there will be something here. It may go completely over everybody's head. I hope not. I hope there's one thing you take out of here today that you might find useful. So when we ask children and adults if they can be tempted to draw something, a tree, this is normally what happens. Children draw trees. You can see there's an incredible regularity to these representations and basically symbols of trees. This just sort of, I love the fact that there's just so much consistency. This person is trying to do different types of trees. We have Christmas trees, there's apple trees, but the apple trees are pretty much all the same. This child is also done also variety here. We have evergreens, and we have, this is what deciduous trees look like. This is what palm trees look like. In her book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, Betsy Edwards capitalized sort of on the state-of-the-art research in left-right brain science differences to sort of try and explain why this happened. So as it was popularized, we all have a left and right hemisphere to our brains. On the left, and I have left-right confusion, so I always have to look at my hand to see the L. So for the left side, it's conveniently enough logic and language and sort of all that sort of thing. And on the right side was thought to be more creative and romantic, intuitive, artistic, that sort of thing. So this is sort of this is the picture here. So we have the left brain was due with logic and goals and planning, and the right side here is all the beautiful colors of the rainbow. As an aside, I find this an incredibly impoverished view of the world. Having been a scientist for 30 plus years, I would say the other side is every bit as bright and colorful. So what Edwards reasoned was that children and adults without training were using the left side of their brain to draw things. So when they were asked to draw something, they draw symbols of trees, not trees. So when Edwards taught art classes, and she's still alive, she's 95, she would be asked things like, how do you draw hair? And she knew what they were really asking. What she knew is they're asking us, how do you draw the symbol for hair? I want to draw the symbol for hair. And if she thought if she could get people to use the right side of the brain to get out of the symbols, that they would be able to draw better. And she has a wonderful book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. These are adult students. These are attempts at self-portraits, and you can kind of see that this actual middle top one is pretty good, but these others, it's symbols for eyes, symbols for the nose, symbols for the lips, symbols for hair. And after having gone through her classes, this is what the same students would do when they had learned to see like an artist, ostensibly to see with the right side of their brain. And there's no arguing with the results, except the model is wrong. So since we have learned in the intervening years is in fact, all of these functions are distributed across both hemispheres. There is lateralization, that's what they call the differentiation, but it's on a different axis. And I'm not going to talk about that today. And so I apologize if people are going around thinking they're still left-brained or right-brained. I'm dashing your delusions and hopefully not your self-worth. But it's sort of not right. It's sort of in the bucket with learning styles. Like this, the science doesn't support it. So I've sort of thinking. So why, if it's not left-right brain, because we know that's a bad model, what might be a better model? And what I have thought is that I think Buddhists have sort of the answer. We might be able to work towards an answer for this question. What we call delusion about the way the world is, a world of cause and effect, of change, of relation, it's certainly one aspect of the way humans have a tendency to generalize. And generalization isn't bad, but we forget that the generalizations are generalizations, that they're abstractions. And sometimes when we go from the generalization, we reify the generalization to what's in front of us, what our actual experience is. And so we end up with sort of drawing a symbol of a tree instead of the tree in front of us. We get up in the morning, we put on symbols of pants, we go to symbols of work, we get irritated by our symbolic boss. We come home and we eat a symbol dinner and with our symbol spouse. And so we just get caught up in this. And I think this is why, as I just said, when we're asked to draw a tree, we draw symbols of tree. And we don't consider the tree in front of us. We consider it to be, sort of the changing and fixed example of trees in general. And we don't have the skills to like observe what's in front of us. We try to draw inherently existent trees. At least this is the way I currently think about it. Now, people do overcome the tendency to draw symbols. There's a lot of great phenomenal representational artists. And it's interesting that one such technique is actually called drawing negative spaces, where you don't draw the leaves, you draw the space around the leaves. So I think that in learning to draw, as a practice, as a hobby, no matter even if you're kind of however good you might get, is a potentially interesting way of understanding form and emptiness. And so we might think of Buddhist practice as being like this. But sometimes we do want to draw the symbol. Oh yeah, so there's a tree. There's a better representational tree. It's still representational. Even pictures of trees, if you zoom in, they're just pixels. So only the tree itself is the tree, and it's that particular tree. But we still need symbols, right? Somebody says we need to talk. This is a great way of communication, but this is a certain ambiguity. And here in the 21st century, we have ways of resolving this ambiguity. And we can see that all of these mean very different things. There's we need to talk. There's we need to talk. We need to talk, and we need to talk. Sorry about what I did. All right, so that was sort of Act 1, to mix metaphors. So I want to shift gears a bit and talk about physical representation itself. And I want to make a bold claim that if things in the world existed the way we often think they do, that art itself wouldn't work. Because ink on paper isn't a tree. And so if ink on the paper were intrinsically ink on a paper, we couldn't be fooled into reading it as a tree. So it's just amazing that this is just pencil on paper, but we read it as a sphere. I can't think of no better example of dependent arising, that our brain turns the shading and everything else in our vision, that we're not ghosts looking out of lenses, although I'm looking out of lenses, but the rest of you who don't have glasses, you're not looking out of lenses. I'm not looking out of lenses through lenses. And you read this as a sphere, and it's just because of the way our brains are. And so our vision, we are not seeing something, we're not a subject seeing an object, but it's a relation. These are just smudges of graphite on wood fiber. And in fact, as you see them now, these are just pixels. These are just illuminated pixels. So it's kind of curious. My favorite way of illustrating these things is actually optical illusions. I love optical illusions because I think, again, these are dependent arising. And they're a good example of like, I don't think, if vision worked the way we think it does, I don't think optical illusions would be possible. So here's a famous one. Which vertical red line is longer? The one on the left or the one on the right? So the ticket booth one or the corner? Yeah, they're both the same length. And it's because we have grown up, we've not even evolved. Culturally, we're in an environment with lots of right angles, and we've learned to read angles that move this way, acute. We've learned to read them as being closer, and angles that go this way, we've learned to read them as being farther away. So even though they're both the same. If you take this illusion to Bushmen in Africa or Aborigines in Australia, the optical illusion doesn't work for them. This is not an optical illusion for them. They see both of them as being the same. So this is just crazy town. This is another favorite. Which square is darker, A or B? Yeah, so you know this already. They're actually the same color. So our ability to perceive color is dependent upon the colors around them. So these strips are that one color, and by connecting them, it changes it to see that these are indeed the same color. But they don't look like they're the same color. So this is a little more crazy town. All right, so the next example. So again, this is I think a great example of dependent arising. Maybe a better example than quantum physics. So the next example, this one though, is going to be a little abstract, and so if you don't quite get it, it's okay. Some of you may have actually seen this optical illusion. It's very popular, and I'm going to present it in a different way than usual. So here's a picture of a young lady. Her head is turned. This is her cheekbone. She's wearing a collar around her neck. This is her ear, an eyelash. This is her nose. She's got a flowing scarf. She's got a feather in her hair. This is a picture of an old lady. This is her eye. She's got a nose. She's kind of sunken down. There's her mouth and chin. There's a wart, the other eyelash. They are, of course, the same picture. And so, and there's actually been recent research which shows whether you stabilize on the young lady or the old lady, it depends upon your age. So the younger you are, the more likely you are to stabilize on the young lady, and the older you are, the more likely you are to stabilize on the old lady. But whenever I see this optical illusion, I always think of the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness is no other than form. It's not a picture of an old lady, or like, it reminds me of Indian logic, right? Is it an old lady? Is it a young lady? Is it neither? Is it both? And yes, yeah, yes, yes. And so I think this is an interesting literal illustration of the dynamic of form and emptiness. And of course, it's ever so much harder for us because we're inside the picture. We're inside the picture, which makes pointing out the differences ever so much harder. I think this is also might be sort of a way to maybe get at what Dogen is talking about practice enlightenment. And we can't separate out practice and enlightenment. We can't separate out the old lady and the young lady in the picture. And why it's hard, and why art might help. All right, so so this kind of is the fun one. So that was Act 2. Again, to mix the metaphors. In Act 3, I'm going to do something a little different. So the interesting thing, so I was sort of ragging on, let me start sharing. It was a little ragging on symbols. And the funny thing is, in medieval China, and then later in Japan, because At one point, at several points in Japanese history, they were fascinated with Chinese culture the same way we are sometimes fascinated with Japanese culture. Mere representation, so the really nice picture of the tree was not considered to be art. Instead, art was something that should capture the essence of the subject and the skill of the artist all in one, and sort of be a demonstration of the practice. So in what is called in Japan sumi-e ink drawing, there are 4 classical symbols. We call them motifs. There's the chrysanthemum, the plum blossom, bamboo, and the mountain orchid. And I happen to have mountain orchids. They're just temperate orchids. They're not as showy as the tropical orchids. They actually have smell. So tropical orchids, they traded off. Somehow in their evolution, they traded off flashiness for really nice smells. So what I'm going to attempt to do on a television tray is, we're going to see if we can do this. All right, so like all such things, this takes a bit of practice, and I'm a little out of practice. And this is when you might want to switch to speaker view if you had switched back to gallery view. Cool for this. This is hard to do live. So there's all right. So so that's artist practice, and that's sort of this is sort of the thing you couldn't really do in the Zendo. So I was kind of excited to try this on Zoom. That's it. Any questions? Let me see. I'm trying to switch back. Yeah, there we go. Discussion. Anything to add? Any artists out there? Everybody's muted.
Jushin,
Yes.
would you
Paul.
define dependent origination for me?
Oh, there's lots of different ways, I think. So I think normally, uh, the normal Buddhist way, I think, of talking about it is normally in the context of the 10 steps of dependent origination. So, and I'm not ever going to remember them. I'm like with Kikon in that respect. Uh, you probably have heard it before. Dependent origin, the 12 links. Let's see. Normally there's a list. Where it happened, it's the 10, 12. Just a second. I should know this, but I always forget them. So it's normally in the context of the Four Noble Truths, and you talk about there's ignorance leads to compounding factors, and I forget the Pali names for all of these. Consciousness, name and form, the sense spheres, contact, feeling, craving, grasping, existence, birth, and aging and death. It's always, you might have seen, back to show. This wheel, there's the wheel of dependent origination. Let's see if I can do a better images of dependent origination. Yeah, this is normally in the Tibetan tradition is sort of this wheel of dependent origin. That didn't help, did it? Man, I can't make it bigger. But I think throughout the Pali Canon, the Buddha really simplifies it. And in fact, it's funny because we just had Rahatsu, and I was just thinking about this after the Buddha's enlightenment. And he says, oh gosh, nobody's going to understand this. I don't think those were his exact words. And he first he comes across somebody and he says, I'm enlightened, I'm the world. I forget what he says, but and the guy, Dokai talks about this all the time. The guy basically says what we would currently say. He goes like, "You're crazy, like you're crazy," and so he finds the 5 ascetics that he was that had shunned him because he had the rice, and he talks to the first one, and he says, and the first one he goes, "Oh, I get it. It's causes and conditions. It's when this arises, this follows. When this happens, that happens." So I always think of it more in sort of the simple view rather than the specific chain of causation here, which is that just kind of a shorthand for causes and conditions. Like there's no there. It's always there's always a simultaneous arising. That there's a relationship, and it's not, a subject perceiving an object. Sorry, that was a long explanation for that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it's
okay.
Every time I try to understand this and listen to a definition, something different comes up in my mind. So I understand more, but I'm still confused about it, and probably will be forever. I just, it's a hard concept for me to grasp, and how it relates to to Zen Buddhism in general. It's kind of me. Sorry.
No, it's good. In fact, so I have other talks rattling around the back of my head, and that might be one. So there you go. Anyone else? Any questions, observations, discussion? A better explanation of dependent origination? Kat?
Hi, Jushin. Thank you so much. I don't know if I have a better definition of dependent origination, but this is the timeliness of your talk just blows my mind. First of all, I have a little bit of a background in neuroscience and human cognition. So to hear you talk about it in terms of delusion in Buddhism is very relevant to me. But, I just got back from Chicago a couple days ago. My mother suffered a stroke. Um, let's see, a week ago Thursday.
I'm sorry.
And her deficits, if you will, that she was left with after her cerebral event are she has an expressive aphasia, so she has a lot of difficulty now. She can chit chat, but when faced with a direct question, she can represent it in her mind but cannot speak it.
Yeah.
And so I am finding that I am relying on different cues to understand her wishes, and it's been very interesting to do that. The other thing is, unfortunately, she had lesions on both sides of the brain. She has a profound right hemisphere field cut, which means that she cannot see anything on the left without turning her head. She also is having trouble decoding words and letters into the symbols that we all recognize. And so the visual world to her is right now a massive confusion. And she's just so kind-heartedly approaching all this. But I realized that perhaps now she is seeing in a different way. That I noticed, like, one thing, they were asking her to decode the letter G. And she finally, after a great amount of effort, was able to see that there was a G, but not the rest of the word. But interestingly, after that, they showed her pictures with actually an artist representation of a scene going on involving a family, and she saw G's everywhere in that picture. And I guess the point that I'm getting to is, like, she has beginner's mind right now. All the old rules, those bets are all off, and so now she is in some ways seeing things for the first time in a new and different way. And I was thinking about that on the drive home. There's a lot that I can learn from this, and one of them is she doesn't make any assumptions about what things are. I see her not leading with her assumptions, but trying to use her senses, to what she has of her senses, to interpret things with, the way she is right now. And she keeps saying that, I'm different now. I'm different now. And maybe we don't all want to have massive strokes, but maybe we want to be different too. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
That's great. No, and I think that's part of what I'm trying to get at is I think in this, we have a tendency to see the ability to produce art as a talent, and there certainly are people who are talented. But it's a skill, it's a practice that does enable you to see the world a different way. Any other discussion? Yes, Jushin.
William de Kooning, great
Mhm.
painter, had
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, and he continued to paint even as he, drifted into Alzheimer's. And some of those paintings are some of the most dramatic paintings that he had because what was it? Muscle memory? Was it perceptual memory? Who knows what was going on? But he continued to work because that's what he knew how to do. So he continued to work. And my dad with Alzheimer's, speaking of perceptual and language and logic, when it really started to manifest, he would try to express something in a sentence and he couldn't find the word that he was looking for. So he would just stop. And that was frustrating for all of us. And he knew it was frustrating for him. And then the next phase was he would try to express something in a sentence and he would come up with a word. It would be an inappropriate word, but he would just use it. He would just throw it out there and we would just keep going. And then that was actually better in a lot of ways. But eventually he went quiet. And that was really interesting to me too, because he continued to manifest whatever energy he had as my dad. It was really obvious he was still that person, even though he was quiet. So I have friends now who are they stayed at my house for a few days, but they to journey down to Arizona where their dad is failing. And so all the people I knew who died were pretty gentle souls, and it was a pretty I don't want to say peaceful, but it was there was a lot of compassion and kindness. Well, their father is um, because of the lack of agency, I will say, he is going through terrible frustrations. And so he gets very, very angry and he throws tantrums. And this is something that I, I just, I don't know how to help because I've never been around people who've thrown tantrums. So, but then he varies from that, from throwing a tantrum from lack of agency and not able to get something done right now. And then he'll swing to the other side and be completely contrite and go into sobbing of being so sorry for having that tantrum. So this whole thing about the the things that are revealed as things fail, as we lose things, is really, really interesting. And especially when my dad failed and died, it was really obvious to me that we're gonna lose everything at some point. So we should make these precious human life, these precious moments while we have them. It's very, very critical. So that's what I have.
No, they're finding that a lot. So I think that's part of the Dharma talk with Paul. So don't anybody take that who's coming up before March. There were mixed reviews. I liked it, but recently there was the birthday broadcast with Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett. And Tony Bennett has Alzheimer's, and the negative view was Tony Bennett was sort of trotted out on stage, poor thing. But he remembered all the songs. It's something they do find that people with strokes or Alzheimer's, that they'll lose things and they'll just sit down and start playing concertos, or in Tony Bennett's case, he was singing all the classics, and he was harmonizing and changing it up with Lady Gaga singing along with him. It is just really kind of amazing. And so, yeah, so I'm learning as many songs as possible so I can play them in my dotage. I figure at least I can do that. hopefully. Anyone else? Aaron?
Yeah, let me turn up there. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I was your painting was awesome. I had you had mentioned those four forms, the chrysanthemum.
The four gentlemen. Yeah, the four gentlemen.
Gentlemen. Could you say a little bit more about how? I mean, do you learn
They're
how
tied
to
to the seasons. They're tied to the seasons. So actually, the plum blossoms come in February, so they're attached to winter. And then I may get this, and there are certain there are the four motifs that you sort of learn first when you're learning sumie, and it teaches you sort of basic strokes that you can apply to other things. And bamboo is summer, chrysanthemum is fall, and the mountain lily, the mountain orchid, comes in the spring. So they're also attached seasonally. And they use different strokes. So making the bamboo is a different stroke. I'm not very good at it. I haven't practiced all the gentlemen, but it's sort of this. You can see it's like a bamboo stalk.
Yeah.
I should have used a lighter wash. And there's ways of putting different levels. They call them colors. There are 5 colors. I didn't. I mixed them a little wrong this morning. And you can put them on different parts of your brush, and when you move it, it makes a different pattern on the paper. So there's a lot to it. I'm not really good. I've decided to specialize for the time being on mountain orchids.
That's great. But so the idea is you had this little repertoire of strokes after you practice, you could bring on.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more. So so the idea of the orchid is they call it fish looking for food. So when you make this one, when you make the second one, you make it so like this is the nose of a fish, and it's going in the same direction as this other fish. And the second stroke is always approximately, it makes what they call this phoenix eye. And then the third stroke is always somehow cutting the phoenix eye. There's things like you never cross 3. There's thick and thin and thick and thin, and you don't cross thick with thick and thin with thin. So there are a lot of, like everything else, like there's this whole sort of wu-wei, like effortless effort aspect of it, which I love, except for the fact that it takes a lot of practice to get to the effortless effort part. I'm gonna say I'm not there yet. But it's why it's also a great practice, because it's like it's not unlike zazen in that respect, where you're not supposed to like criticize afterwards your zazen, like, oh, there was a crummy sitting, because whatever. Any other questions? Anyone else? Chad and then Mary, you want to?
I just wanted to say that, Stephen, it's as human beings, but also, I guess, Zen practitioners with awareness maybe on some days, it is very difficult to turn off all those expectations and learning and all those mechanisms that make us see things in one rigid way time after time. And in some respects, we need that because we have to navigate the world. And I suppose that in the deep practice of Zazen, we are encouraged to sort of enter a space of, you know, emptiness without without all those things that guide our everyday life. But do you have suggestions about how to live life seeing, as you say, essence rather than form?
Well, I think that's the trick, right? So the first thing I would, so I don't think, this is me in Zazen, we're not invited to particularly do something, except that we're invited to just kind of do one thing, to just sit. And Uchiyama Roshi, like he said, you know, the thing is like the waking up is every time we realize we're lost in thought. Like it's not sort of, sometimes people equate sort of Zazen with or mindfulness with sort of what do they got, flow states where you lose track of time. I don't see it that way. For me, especially like during sesshin, for me, time flows the way it's supposed to flow instead of fast or slow. That might just be me. But yeah, it is hard, right? Because again, to use the analogy, we're inside the picture, and its form is emptiness. Empty is a form, but as someone has said, form is form too. And I think that's why it's practice enlightenment, because you just kind of have to, you know, you may not ever get good at it, or and maybe that's beside the point. Maybe that's beside the point. Which probably in some ways might sound like a non-answer. Welcome to Zen. But if you look at it just, I think sometimes on the axis, and this stuff is just so deep, multifaceted. But if you just look at the axis of expectations, it's not even the symbols. It's like, it's not even not, it's like, it's being okay with things not turning out the way you planned. Like you still have to plan, you save for retirement, you do all of that, you plant, you know. That was always the thing. It's like, if you're living for the day, why are the monks planting for the fall harvest? It's like, well, yeah, because you're you're gonna eat. So, but you might not be here to eat, but you got to do it anyway. You got to save for retirement. You have to go to work. You have to do all those things. For those of us who are not yet retired, some of us are living off of our retirement. That's good too. So I think sometimes that's the one I try to concentrate on the most, is not being attached to results. Still planning. Sometimes you get lost in the symbols, but it's the attachment and the being. We just so very much want to be in control, and we aren't. And we probably aren't in any way, in any degree, in control. And that's a hard and bitter pill to swallow some days of the week. Yeah, that's what I got right now. Someone else might have something more.
All you say is true, and it's, you know, you're right. Moments of enlightenment.
Yeah. Mary, did you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Jushin. And thank you everyone for your comments. It's always great to hear people's comments. So I wanted to pick up one word that you said in your Dharma talk, and that was relational. A hobby that I have and share with others is it's pattern drawing.
Yeah.
And it's the beauty of this hobby, doing patterns, just patterns, and actually the patterns are based on only 4 patterns are black and white, in its truest form, ink on paper. And it's just either a line, an S curve, an orb, or a half circle, which would be like a C curve. So all patterns are based on those 4 ink on paper. And what is so wonderful about this non-representational pattern drawing is that you're never drawing a tree or a duck or anything that would be in your mind judging how it looks on paper. It's completely non-representational. And in fact, the one of the big paramount features of pattern drawing is no mistakes. There's no eraser. You take your ink, you apply it to paper, and that's it. You don't erase, you don't redraw anything. And so it's a meditative practice, but the word relational really stuck out with me is that I take many classes with other people that do this, and we've had 4-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 20-year-olds, graphic artists, people that have a lot of education in drawing, 80-year-olds, people that are just across the board different in many ways, but we use a string, so an idea, and we draw patterns. So at the end, and usually it's on a small piece of paper, we make a mosaic with all of our art pieces, and the beauty and that comes out of that is just amazing. And it's observational, just exactly what you were talking about. You look at 10 of these pieces and you immediately want to just go in and say, wow, this really strikes me. And another person would say, yeah, I like the way this looks, or anyway, it's just comments, but we're all just lumped together and there are no mistakes, and it's non-representational. So that's a way to be in with art too.
Do you have one there?
Well, so here's so that's
oh, your internet froze. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Better tell them what the name of it is.
It's called Zentangle.
Yeah. I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's called
it's
Zentangle.
very interesting. But
it's easy, and it's non-representational, and it's meditative, and there are no mistakes and no erasers, and anybody can do it. And so anyway,
yeah, it's a continuum, right? Because the sumie it's not representational, and it uses motifs, and there's 5 rules, and you're just one more step the other way, where it's like, okay, we're not going to even try to even look like an mountain orchid. That's very cool, and definitely, especially the idea, because unfortunately in sumie you can make mistakes, And I have. So that's great that way. And we might have time for one more if anyone has a short comment, but we're almost to the end of our time. I'm glad I finished a little early. All right. Thank you, everybody.